Welcome to the Age Well Home and Lifestyle podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Bradley. I'm the founder of Age Well Home and Lifestyle. This podcast is rooted in one essential truth. To age well and thrive, we must be radically curious. Curious about who we really are, about what truly matters. Curious enough to question everything we've been told so we can finally design a life and home that reflects our truest selves. Here we treat life as our masterpiece. We see ourselves as detectives gathering clues, uncovering our deepest gifts, and consciously curating a lifestyle and home that is both healing and fulfilling. Join me for solo episodes and conversations with guests where I help us get closer to the root of living our best lives in mid-age and beyond. Amanda was raised in Salem, Oregon. As an actor, she traveled, trained, and performed all around the world. In 2015, she became a full-time caretaker for her grandparents when her grandmother's Parkinson's kicked in and her grandfather developed dementia. She quickly realized that there was a need to get as much information out to the public as possible to educate on ways to support someone as a home healthcare aide. During COVID, she sat down and wrote a 6-part limited series called Driving the Daisies. Driving the Daisies explores the loss of independence and caretaking. She is currently in the fundraising stage to shoot the pilot episode. Let's dive in here. I want to hear your story. I love what you're doing with your own life experience. You're turning it into a whole creative project. But start with your story.
So, I'm Amanda Fugate-Moss. I'm an actor, a writer, a producer. And in 2015, I became a full-time caretaker for my grandparents when their health deteriorated. Backtrack a little bit, I grew up in Salem, Oregon. And then my journey took me to England for training. Well, San Francisco, then England, then New York, and then Los Angeles. And then I came home and became a caretaker for my grandparents. So it's been quite the journey.
And your grandmother had Parkinson's and your grandfather dementia, is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell me more, tell everybody more about just that, the full-time caretaking and how you chose to take that on.
Yeah. So what happened with my grandparents were very, very independent people. They were used to doing everything by themselves. They were the ones, like, if anybody needed help, my grandma was the one that would jump in. And she was very independent in the beginning, even with the Parkinson's. But then she went grocery shopping and she slipped on a grape in the aisle and broke her arm. And that
Uh,
was the beginning of her deterioration, where it became, her disease kicked in, became very bad. And she basically, she'd shake constantly like this. And she was taking all these medications, part of a study at OSU. And they were trying to work on it and stuff, but it just was not getting better. It just continued to get worse. So when I stepped in, I became her hands. She knew, she was sharp as a tack brain wise, but she had trouble with doing things. So I would step in and I would take care of things for her. And she loved to cook. And so I actually learned how to cook through her because I was a microwave queen before that. So measuring everything, and she'd just sit there and talk me through it, and we'd make lots of recipes together. So that was my grandmother. My grandfather had kicked colon cancer, but then he was diagnosed with dementia. He actually went out shopping. He had forgotten his cell phone at home. This took place in Dallas, Oregon. So, if you go up the hill, there's only 2 grocery stores. There's Safeway and there's Walmart. Well, he went shopping, and 6.5 hours later, he came back. And so my grandma and he ended up going to his doctor. They ended up doing tests and diagnosed him with dementia. So she ended up having to revoke his driver's license, take it away, which made him very frustrated and angry because that took away his independence there. And he actually was at the beginning of dementia when I was there at the beginning. And then my grandma ended up dying in a freak accident. And when she ended up dying, his dementia kicked in really hard. And so then it became a lot of 24/7 caretaking for him.
And how old were they at this time?
So my grandma, she was in her, I'd say she was about 82. No,
Okay.
it was her late 70s. Yeah,
Okay.
and then my grandfather was in his 80s. So, yeah.
Idea of losing the independence, the Parkinson's taking away the physical abilities, and you became her hands.
Hmm.
And then the dementia, the mind. So losing that independence and having you there to help them, how powerful. And I feel more and more people almost need permission to do that these days. Um, what what allowed you to say, yeah, of course I'm going to do this? Was it even a question for you to step in there as their full-time caretaker? Because I'm sure it's different now as you reflect on it compared to in the moment. So in the moment, what was that like? Yeah, I'm doing this.
It was so interesting because when my grandmother came to me, I had just moved back. I actually was relocating up to Portland to build some film credits, some TV film credits, because I took a marketing class, and one of the techniques was to get into a smaller market because I had the huge theater
Okay.
credits, but I didn't have the TV film credits. So I was just passing through, and I stopped to visit my grandparents, and my grandmother, watching her, it was so heart-wrenching. Like, she teared up, and she asked me, and to her it was so hard because she had been so independent, and she didn't want to take away my independence. She was so worried about stepping on my freedom. And to me, it was a no-brainer because I was so close to my grandparents. I was so lucky. I was the oldest grandchild that I grew up. We'd spend Christmases and summers down in California with them, and I got a chance to like be with them, every chance I got. Like, if I get a vacation, my grandma and my mom used to like argue because my mom would say, Mom, I'm her mom, because I
Aw.
was so close to my grandmother that, and people often thought, like, if we'd go out when my grandma was younger, people always thought she was my mother, and she'd never correct
Aw.
them.
She's like, sure, believe what you want.
Yeah, she'd never correct them.
I love this. I love the closeness. Um, and so, what propelled you to create Driving the Daisies? The Tell us about Driving the Daisies.
So, Driving the Daisies is a dramedy musical that I wrote and I created during COVID. And I just came to the reflection that there's so much information that people just don't know, that they just don't understand. And if they could get ahead of it before they go on to the caretaking experience, it would be so much easier for them. For me, I was thrown in, and it was a lot of learning right on the spot. And then when things would happen, things could go from 0 to 10 in a second. And they did with like my grandmother. And at first, it was like some things I was ahead of the game because my family had put things into place. I can't stress enough. I work now as a notary, and I can't stress enough how important it is to get that paperwork done. Um, I do presentations. I've done a few live presentations, and the first thing I start with is paperwork. Get the paperwork done. People think, oh, that's for older people and stuff, but you never know. If an illness kicks in,
Yeah.
a disease kicks in, you want to get it done before it's too late or before a doctor has to
Yeah.
step in and assist. Because that for me was life saving, in the sense that when my grandma um, she had her freak accident. She actually was walking by a fireplace and a spark jumped out and her clothes caught on fire. And so they had
Oh
to
my
rush
gosh.
her to Portland because it was in Dallas at the time. So they had to life flight her to Portland. And then because my grandparents had the paperwork set up, we had right inside the office, we had their DNRs. So I could grab that off of there. I could hand it to the ambulance driver, and just make sure that we're ahead of the game. And then we had our packet. We had our packet of the durable power of attorney. We had our packet of the advance directive. Could grab that. And when you get into an experience like that, your brain shuts off. Or at least for me, the brain shut
Right.
off.
Right.
It just kicked into
Yeah.
survival gear. It was assisting, 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 and then packing my grandpa up because he's in a daze and he's confused and we've got to get to Portland and we're sleeping, in the hospital, and I could just grab it and go. If I didn't have all that stuff in place, can you imagine what I would have had to go through? You know?
Right. And that's what people just don't think of it. It's like we're not only are we experiencing life and you're losing independence and the emotions, but then you have these details that you just put off because it's hard, it's challenging. So I love that you give presentations, and we'll link details in the show notes. You give presentations to guide people in how to do that. So I love that.
And I discovered, I don't know if you know this, but approximately 1,200 people that are older die in fire related incidents every year. Um,
No, oh my
and
gosh.
my grandmother's doctor, she even told us, like, when, I took my grandpa in afterwards, we went in for a checkup and stuff, and she said, you wouldn't believe how many older people die in fire related incidents. And this
Wow.
was with my grandparents' house. We had double screens on everything. We had a screen on the fireplace and then we had a screen in front of it, and it still was able to get out. So I can't stress how important it is that you just have to take care of yourself. And even with my grandmother slipping on the grape and stuff, the second you break something in your body, the deterioration just excels tremendously. And
Yeah.
when my
Yeah.
grandma passed, my grandfather's dementia, it just excelled the same way, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. When one passes, the other's symptoms often
yeah,
explode.
yeah. And they were married almost 65 years. They were just shy a couple months, so you can imagine, you know. Yes. Yep. Since
So with driving the daisies, where are you with that? Where are you with that? The production, and I just want to say, I love that you're sharing the story in a way that's creative, multi-sensory, because oftentimes, one person learns by reading, one person learns by visual, auditory, music, and to put it into this creative container, I think is powerful. So share where you're at with that.
Yes. So Driving the Daisies is a 6-part limited series. I wrote it, originally I was going to do it as a film, but I was like, there's just too much information. Plus, you want to go on that exploration with the family. You want to explore like the community and learn about things. Um, and I knew it was so important to me. There's so much when you're a caretaker, there's a lot of stressful things, there's a lot of deep things, things that can be down, pull your energy down and make you depressed and stuff. But there's also a lot of
Absolutely.
up. There's a lot of light, a lot of joking. And with Driving the Daisies, it was so important to me that I wanted the up in there too. That's why there's a lot of
Nice.
humor in it. There's musicality in it. Um, I always, when I describe it, I say, imagine if they took On Golden Pond meets all in the Family meets crazy ex-girlfriend, and you get Driving the Daisies.
Oh my.
So that was so important to me. And I'm like, you
Yeah.
can't do it in one movie. You could, but it's going to take, you want to get a lot of that in there. You want to get a lot of the humor and the livelihood in it too, because it's people, and people,
Yeah.
we all have different levels. So,
Yeah. And the experience is like that. It's like we have the heavy times being a caretaker, just life in general. We have the heavy times, but if we stay stuck in the heavy and we focus on the heavy, we miss out on the delight and the laughter, even if it's tough. Even if, I picture your grandmother giving you not being a cook or a chef, her giving you directions and you being like, what am I doing? And I mean, just the joy of that interaction. And now you have that as a lifetime memory. So I love that you're bringing it. It's not just the tough, emotional, lower level emotions. It's remember the delight and remember to purposefully bring in that into the experience. Go ahead.
definitely. And so that's where I'm at. I've written a 6-part limited series. We're in the fundraising stage. Right now, we're working toward our $12,000 goal. So it's been building. We've been building it for a while. And once we reach all the funds, then we're going to start filming. And then we're going to be filming the
Okay.
pilot episode. And then I want to, I kept going back and forth whether I wanted to do a sizzle reel or I wanted to do a pilot episode. And I want to do a pilot episode because I want it to be done
Okay.
how I envision it. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be utilizing, it's going to be Pacific Northwest cast and crew. It's so important to me to keep Oregon involved, because this is where they ended up finishing their life off and stuff. So I want to honor that. And I grew up in Oregon, so.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So, people who want to help, how can they help you? How can they donate? What can they do to support this project?
So there's different ways. Of course, we love follows. You can follow us. Our hashtags are Driving the Daisies or Driving the Daisies series. We use both of them. You can follow us on, we're on Facebook. There's a Facebook page, Driving the Daisies. I think it's Driving the Daisy series. We're on Instagram, TikTok, and then you can, of course, we would love contributions toward our campaign, and that's on GoFundMe, and the tag is Driving the Daisies Aging Population Film.
Ah, fantastic. And I love your logo. The logo is so cute and beautiful, and I'll definitely include that in wherever I post all of this information. Um, what else? If there's a family experiencing this now, what's one or two pieces of advice you have for the family?
Yes. And I forgot to mention, if you go on to Instagram or on Facebook onto our page, there's a link tree there. You can go on to
Excellent.
Linktree, and I have been posting videos to assist people. I also have, right now I just created one for specifically for dementia and hacks, ways to support somebody with dementia. So that's
Fantastic.
all on there. Um, so I'm sorry, could you restate your?
Yeah. Well, that's. I asked, what's one or two ways to help families that might be navigating this type of experience? But just what you mentioned too, in regards to the link tree, and you having things that will assist families there. but if you had to think of one or two things off the top of your mind, just somebody navigating in the midst of caring for their loved ones, what would be something that can maybe get them unstuck?
Yes. First and foremost, mindset. Your mindset is everything. So, for specifically, like with my grandfather with dementia, the most important thing I found was making him feel like he was in charge. So I was always finding ways that he felt like he was in charge, even though I was still protecting him.
No.
So like on my thing, my picture that I did recently, I mentioned like a wallet experience. So let's take the fact that with dementia, you lose things. That you also want to be protected. We did have a scammer that I was walking by and they had convinced my grandfather that they were one of his grandchildren, and he was pulling out his credit card. And luckily, I walked by and I was able to stop that in time.
Yes.
So I felt like I always had to protect him. So what we did was, and this was actually my mother's idea, is we created two wallets. So I had his wallet that was his main wallet, and that had all the important things in it. And then with his wallet, his personal wallet that we created, um, I put his military ID in there. I put
No.
his family pictures that he had in his regular wallet. I transferred those in there. I put things in there that made him feel like he was in control. And then when we go to like doctor appointments, you become sneaky, but it's sneaky to help that person or support that person.
Yep.
So if we were going to a doctor appointment, I'd take his medical cards out of his wallet and I'd sneak them into his other wallet. So when he got there, he could pull out his wallet and hand them his cards. And then I'd make
Yeah.
sure I'd put him back in his permanent wallet. If we were
I love that. That's so thoughtful.
Yeah. And if we were going to the bank, I'd take out his debit card and I'd transfer it over to the other wallet and then I put it back, or shopping, his credit cards. But it also helped me to protect him, but helped him to feel like he was in control. I also
Yeah.
utilized, I think something that's so important is asking questions instead of making statements. So whenever I was addressing my grandpa, I tried to ask questions, because then it's him, he's processing it and he's giving his insight, and that way he feels like he's in control. So things like that. With driving, that was huge for him. So he was notorious for stealing the car keys.
Oh
So
no.
what you can do is you can put different car keys on there, or get car keys made that look the same, but one's a dud set. So that way they can hold on to the car keys, or if they take them, they're not going to get in the car and drive off. I have heard of, I read about somebody they had the same issue, and so what they did was they disconnected the in the engine, they disconnected the battery. So if that
Yeah.
person, even though they had their car keys, they couldn't drive anywhere because the car didn't work,
Yeah.
you know. And so they could disconnect the battery and then put the battery back on. You want to look for ways that you can support that person. Um, Falls are another huge thing. As I mentioned before, you don't want bones broken, because for younger people, it's no big deal. They can heal back and stuff. But when you become older, it accelerates the diseases. So you want to make sure, how am I protecting that person? In their house, they had a glass table with sharp corners that went into the back house, and we ended up putting a rounded wooden table in the front, things like
Yep.
that. Getting rid of area rugs. um, that was the first thing. We ended up, as his disease progressed, I ended up having to rely on respite care. And so they came in, the nurse comes in, she does an evaluation, and she says, how do you want our support? What do you need? So for like my grandpa with his dementia, if you're not aware, with dementia, people often become afraid of water. And so he stopped bathing, and I could not get him to bathe no matter what I did. And he, with his personality type, he became aggressive. That we were warned about that with his doctor. Um, so Respite was able to come in, and so we turned it into a game. He was a flirt. I knew I was not going to be using a male to assist him because that would like completely upset him. So he was always a flirt with women. So I requested a woman, and I always let them know he's harmless. I let them know ahead of time he's harmless. But he'd come in and they'd say, "Okay, Fred, you need to take your clothes off now." And he'd go, "You first." And it was like it was a joke to him, and it became a game. So she was able to easily get him into the shower where she could bathe him, or not bathe him, but she instructed him. She'd stand at the door and tell him what to do, and then he'd do it, and she'd guide him. And
Yeah.
so it became fun for him.
Absolutely.
I'd also highly recommend utilizing something that's important to that person. For my grandfather, it was music. So with like when I'd see in his eyes, if you've taken care of somebody with dementia, you can see when they're confused, like there's this blank stare. So I'd utilize music to bring him back. So we'd start singing together, or I'd put on music with his favorite, he loved like Frank Sinatra and that kind of music. He loved the crooners, and so putting crooning music on, it kind of helped him it brought him back a lot of times. So things like that. Socialization is incredibly important. They had a front porch, so every morning he'd go out and he'd eat his I'd take it, bring his newspaper was there, so he'd get his newspaper. I'd bring his breakfast out, and he'd just sit and talk to people, like as they walked by.
Awesome.
So because especially as the disease progresses, people draw in and they don't want to be near other people, and they lock themselves away, type thing. They just want to stay away from people. And I think it's because they know their brain and their memories going. They pick up on it. He would pick up on it. There were times like he would apologize to me afterwards, so I knew something was there, where
Yeah.
he knew something was going on, but he didn't know what,
Yeah.
and stuff. So
This. Go ahead.
so I just think that those are ways to support. Not focusing with my grandma, it was about not focusing on the disease. It was about focusing on the memories we could form together. I mentioned cooking. She also loved gardening. So when she had gone out, she would buy lots of plants. And so she'd sit on the porch and tell me what to do. And I'd be digging holes and planting and, but not focusing on what she couldn't do, but on what she could do. She could still give me those verbal cues. She could still, we could spend time together, and she was all mentally there. So it was, I think that's so important, and not focusing on the loss, but on what you get.
Absolutely. And I'm hearing two big themes through all of those things. One, it's very personal. You really have to sense and feel who that person's true self is and help continue to bring that out no matter what level of deterioration they're at. And also gamifying it as a caretaker, having fun, being creative with how to allow them to continue to feel like they're independent. And then also gamifying just the daily activities you're doing. So the personalization and gamifying, and so many other things, of course. But you are a wealth of information, and I feel like this production is just going to be so powerful and so needed. I will link in the show notes and all of that, everything you mentioned in regards to GoFundMe, helping, sharing, and all of that. Any last message in regards to any of the information, whether it's caregiving or driving the daisies?
Um, as I mentioned before, paperwork. Get your paperwork done. I don't care what
Yeah,
age you are. Get your paperwork done. Because you don't
I
know.
love it. Final message, paperwork.
And
And then call you to be the notary.
oh, that's wonderful. Yes. And just be good to each other. I think that,
Oh,
I think that so much of life is about speeding up. It seems like we're in an era where everything's speeding up and getting things done quickly, quickly, quickly. Maybe take a little time and slow down,
yeah,
especially with your loved ones. And if you're becoming a caretaker or if you have somebody aging, take a little time. That was something I didn't mention, but I noticed as a caretaker I was slowing down a lot because for me I'm like go go go. I want to go. I want to go. And a lot of times it wasn't going. It was slowing down. It was really listening. That's another thing, really listening to the person that you're working with because they know what they
yeah,
need, a lot of times. And if they don't know, they just need to talk. I see that as a notary. I go into a lot of facilities and I get approached by a lot of people in wheelchairs or people sitting in the hallways, that are trying to get that socialization and they just need to talk. They
yeah,
just want somebody to listen, you know.
yeah,
Listen to your loved ones, especially if they're going through a trying time, you know.
yeah. Being
Being
with them
present.
more than
Yeah,
doing.
being present.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
being.
Put your phone
Uh,
down and just listen, turn off the
yeah,
technology
yeah.
because those are
Thank you.
golden moments. you know.
Exactly, exactly. And sometimes taking the phone out, maybe to take a picture or a
Yes.
video,
Yes.
but I 100% get what you're
Get
saying.
videos. I wish I had more
Um,
videos. I took some videos
yeah,
and I play them over and over just to hear their voices and see them and stuff. But yeah, get videos if you can.
yep. Tune in. The last episode I did was with Joshua, a gentleman that has docu history, a company, and he does videos of your loved ones. So that's a way to do it too. Uh, but Amanda, this is fantastic. I hope you get your funding as soon as possible, and I will share all the links and everything. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for sharing your story and putting your story into a creative outlet to share with other people and hopefully help thousands and millions of people. So thank you.
I definitely hope so. That's the goal.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
just educating because there's so
Yep.
much, and know that your story is going to be different. Everybody, no matter what the person's going through, everybody has a little bit different story. They have similarities, but you're going to find that you're going to go with, what's happening. So,
Yep. Yep. And to reach out for support.
yes,
And you're here
yes,
for support if somebody needs it. Um, yeah. Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you for having
Yeah,
me.
absolutely. Have a good one, Amanda.
You too.
Thanks for tuning in to the Age Well Home and Lifestyle podcast. If this episode sparked something in you, share it with a friend or family member. Let it be the start of a real life, meaningful conversation because that's how we grow together. And I'd love to hear from you. What topics are you curious about? What questions are on your mind? Reach out and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, live true, and keep creating a life and home that's aligned with your truest self.